welcome to the March 2024 meeting, indoor meeting of the Raleigh Astronomy Club. So, want to go through some safety. If you're at home, look around, make sure you're not going to trip on anything, trip on your husband, trip on your wife or anything on the way out. So, we're going to identify room hazards. We got cables in the back running across, and we got camera tripods, and we got chairs and everything else. So, be careful, please. Okay. Who's got a CPR certificate in here and can do CPR? Uh-oh. Mine's a little old too. Okay, well, don't let me die if I pass out. Okay, I need somebody to raise their hand saying I will call 911 if there's a problem. Annalise. Okay, fire equipment, there's fire extinguisher in back there. Right. Okay, I already did that. So if we had a fire alarm or something, you go out each side, out that way, out that way. Don't go that way down the hall, and don't go in the elevator. Go out the sides and up the stairs. Okay. So I'm not going to read this verbatim. Introduce yourself in the break to everybody. You want us to hold the questions to the end, or you want to do it in the middle? Okay. So we'll have a discussion right there in the middle. I say this every meeting. Guess who can hear you if you don't have the microphone? No one. So please don't do that. If you're on the Zoom call, please put your questions in a chat and we'll ask them. Okay, real quick, we're going to go over our upcoming events, and we'll do this again later on. Steve, if you want to do this, I'll be glad to shut up, but I'll just read them off. So we got Food Lion tomorrow. There's 4 of us that are going to Virginia, and we're going to have a program for Food Lion. Doug is talking on Sunday. What is that? Sunday for the Eclipse primer. Statewide Star Party and First Fridays at 3 Bear Acres. April 13th is another one of the Food Lion. These are kind of far away. These are like 4-hour drives. Okay, we got another Willard rooftop. Nobody? Okay. Okay, the middle school STEAM night. First Fridays again, May 3rd. By the way, you'll notice that this is the day that it will rain. And you'll also know, okay, Art Space Family Days, May the 11th. Okay, so, no, not until you have a microphone.
Let you know that Greg and I are going to be over at 3 Bears. He's been hired to do storytelling. So I'll be playing music May 3rd.
In the rain. So I very much thank everyone who sent me a suggestion for today of where to socialize after the meeting that isn't poor Sammy's. And so I had to choose. And so I just kind of went, I didn't, not that I don't like Barton or something. I just didn't choose his. Okay. Or whatever. So I will show this after the meeting. I did make a barcode for a map or a QR code. Okay. Tonight's speaker. Tonight's speaker is Tony Rice. Most of you should know him. Tony's a lifelong volunteer with NASA's Solar System Ambassador Program. He sits in classrooms, museums, and other organizations. He speaks, not sits, excuse me, in classrooms, museums, and other organizations on space flight. He also helps other TV meteorologists and National Weather Service forecasters around the country engage with their audiences with the latest astronomy information. And he said yes when I asked him would he like to present. So this is Tony.
And there's my pretty picture. The image that I literally waited all my life to grab. And that's just with my simple Dob and a very inexpensive filter. The the center one is of totality. Everything else was with a SLR. I am not an astrophotographer by any stretch of the imagination, but I had to try to get this. The one I took with my DSLR, it's kind of the cardboard Eclipse glasses version of a filter for a camera. It had, you know, kind of the tabs and the slots, like paper dolls, in cardboard, and had, you know, just like a slightly larger piece of film. I think I paid $20 for it, and I'm going to use it again here in a couple of days. It worked just fine, but I'm very happy with this image. Ended up getting it printed on steel, and it's hanging up over my doorway in my office at home. But we'll get into that. I'm sure we'll talk about 2017 some. So one thing I've learned from my journalist friends is don't bury the lead. So here's that. There's 2024. And this is probably the fourth or fifth time I've given this talk. I try to tweak it a little bit and include some things in there, questions that come up along the way. I just added one more slide in there based on a question I got last night. I was up at the American Meteorological Society meeting at my alma mater. I went to Virginia Tech, so I was up in Blacksburg last night, and they brought up a really good question, so I added that one. But the message I've been giving folks about totality, or about this total eclipse in general, is if you can get into the path of totality, absolutely do. And I think I'm kind of preaching to the choir here on that, but it's kind of surprising the folks that are asking the question about what's the difference between 99% and 100%. We get it because we've paid attention to this stuff. I'm a little bit surprised that there hasn't been more hype yet. I suspect it's probably going to start coming in about a week's time. That being said, I've just about every day this week, I've done one or two interviews with some of these meteorologists that I work with. I did one with folks up in Harrisonburg, Virginia yesterday. And then the day before that, it was Myrtle Beach. And then before that, it was down in Atlanta. They're starting to wake up on it. People are going to get excited about this here real soon. But the reason I put those obscurations up there, and that's for North Carolina, of course, is one of the questions that you get all the time is, okay, I can't make it to totality. You know, it's a long drive. Flights are really expensive now. Hotels are really expensive. If you didn't get it a couple of months ago, it's going to be really expensive. So if you're going to be limited to a experience here in Raleigh, and actually this picture sitting in front is probably a pretty good representation of about how much obscuration we're going to have here in Raleigh. So if you're stuck here in Raleigh, you know, is it worth jumping in the car for a couple hours and going up to Boone? Is it worth going out to Asheville? Other than Asheville has just an amazing food and beer scene, that's worth going for, but it's not going for the eclipse. The difference between 70% and 95% just isn't that much. Yep.
I'm gonna try this plan.
Okay.
Hopefully it might work. Take off Sunday morning and then try to find a place to stay somewhere around Lexington, Kentucky, Louisville, where you're at least 100 miles or more away from the eclipse totality path.
Yeah, I'd agree with that advice. And just based on what I've seen with hotels poking around a little bit, once you're about an hour outside of the path, it starts getting less nutty, the prices. So that's a pretty good plan.
Then take off, check out early about 2 a.m. in the morning, and then start heading for the totality path. I did this with Greenville, South Carolina, and Clemson in 2017, and it worked exceptionally well. Then after the eclipse, the totality in it, most people left and got in the traffic jam. I stayed for the whole thing, then went down to a quick trip and made my assault on the drink and frozen machines. Then started up the interstate, printed some photos out, hit my Corona photos first, then got something to eat, then back to another Walgreens to about 1 a.m. printing pictures. And I completely missed all the traffic. That's assuming that the weather forecast is good in that area. Otherwise, I might have to simply settle for a partial eclipse.
Let's go ahead and talk plans. Let's get back into this. I would kind of advise against moving around much on Monday morning based on what we saw with 2017. And when you look at this, so 2017 was awesome. And I'm hoping we'll have some time for some stories because I know many of you experienced 2017 since it was a relatively short ride, at least down there it was, to see it in South Carolina. The ride back, to your point, was pretty bad. I was in Santee, South Carolina. I was right where the path crossed I-95 at a little campground there. We had rented a cabin for a couple of days. I did not get a cell signal until 2 a.m. because 95 was a parking lot. And the reason I throw this up, this is Great American Eclipse put that out there, showing what the driving time is for people, trying to get it across to them that, they're closer than they think. They're trying to drive people towards the path. It's no big secret that the majority of the US lives in the eastern part of the country. So this eclipse is going to be seen by more people ever. And there's a lot of really big cities there. I think that the traffic is going to be worse this time. So there's a video that you can, well, it's an animated GIF of Google traffic from 2017. It does not show the path of the eclipse at all, but you can see the path of the eclipse as it bleeds red, as the shadow moves over. And to your point, people get in their cars after totality. They don't tend to stay for the last part of the eclipse, for the final bit of the partial eclipse. They say, okay, show's over. They get in the car, they want to go somewhere, or ain't going nowhere. So this has come up, so let's go ahead and talk about some possible ways to work through this and some possible ideas. Definitely you want to have a full gas tank because there's probably going to be stuck in traffic. There might be challenges with shortages and things like that. You want to have water in the car, especially if you're going to be in Texas, Oklahoma, somewhere like that where it might be a little bit warm. One technique I've heard some seasoned eclipse chasers do is they will pick kind of 3 spots. And they might even get 3 sets of hotel reservations. And a couple days before they'll make their decision on what's looking good, and they'll get rid of 1 or 2 of those reservations. But even if they settle on one, they've probably got in mind wherever they're planning on staying, and they've got 2 other places to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west. They're going to stay overnight in that middle part, and they're going to get up first thing in the morning. They're going to make their go, no go decision on whether they're going to stay at that location, or if the weather's looking iffy and they want to go north or they want to go south. That's a pretty good option. It would be an even better option or even better strategy, I think, for a sunrise eclipse. This one's going to be pretty close to solar noon. And that has some benefits because I'm really looking forward to seeing some of those corona pictures because we're going to be looking through pretty much 1 layer of atmosphere. When you're looking at a sunrise or a sunset eclipse, you're looking through 40+ layers of atmosphere. So there's lots of Rayleigh scattering there. There's lots of opportunity for that light to get scattered. We're going to see a really pure image there. The other benefit there is we're not going to be fighting with trees or buildings or whatever to be able to see the eclipse. It's going to be just about right overhead. That's kind of nice, but it's also midday, so lots of time for the traffic to build up. I don't want to dwell on the traffic too much, but it's going to be a factor. So this is something that's worth pointing out. There's going to be a lot of, look at those cities. They're some of the largest cities in the US. There's going to be a lot of people that have the opportunity to do it. It's on a Monday, which will keep some people at home. But so when you compare 2017 to 2024, and you look at the population density, that's why I'm saying what I'm saying about the possibilities of some pretty interesting traffic. A lot of cows saw 2017. A lot more people are going to see 2024, and people get in cars. So this is going to be review for most of you, but I've had this in the slide deck for a little while, and it's worth throwing in there just so we're all singing up the same sheet of music. I was invited down to Atlanta about 2 years ago. One of the media companies, ownership groups, brings all of their meteorologists into Atlanta, mostly because every Delta flight in the world passes through there, I think. So it's really easy for them to get them there. But they bring their all their meteorologists in, and they have a couple of days of talks. They bring people like me in to talk about whatever's, interesting in the sky. They wanted me to talk about the eclipse since we had one coming up in the one in 2023, one of their stations that passed through there. There were some folks up in Washington State too that, they did coverage from down in Oregon. And then of course this one in 24 is going to be big business. But I threw this together just to kind of get everybody singing off the same sheet of music. Eclipses are basically shadows. That's the way to think about it. And it's the ordering of the sun, moon, and earth. But one thing about lunar eclipses that a lot of folks don't realize, yes, it is a shadow being cast, but you can still see the moon. The reason that you're still seeing it is because the light is being scattered or is being filtered through our atmosphere. And for the same reason that a sunset looks red, the light that is making it to the moon's surface looks red. It's all being scattered. The blue light is being scattered out through our atmosphere and it gets shined onto the moon's surface. The lunar surface is about the same color and same reflectivity as the screen here. So it's really good at reflecting that light back. 3 different types of eclipses. Total, which is what we've got coming up now. Annular, we had just back in October, and partial, an annular is a form of a partial eclipse. There's a 4th one here that's even rarer. That's a hybrid. Last time we saw a hybrid around here was in 2013. Just barely any of the US saw it. I happened to see it down in Myrtle Beach. It was right at sunrise. I've got a picture of it in a moment that I threw up in front of a bunch of meteorology students, and they all geeked out on it because there's something kind of cool in there. Any questions? I think we have a question back there.
So the 2013, was that November 3rd, 2013?
Was it the 14th? I think it was in November.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually took a picture of that and I didn't know it was a hybrid.
That was a hybrid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was just like right at the end of it. So those are pretty rare. The reason totals and annulars exist is because the moon's orbit is not completely circular. And just like Grover taught us, back in Sesame Street days, something that's far away looks smaller. Therefore, when the eclipses occur at a point in the moon's orbit where it's farther away, it's going to look a little bit smaller and not big enough to completely cover the sun. Worth noting that our sun-moon Earth system is unique in that, there's well over 1,000 exoplanets that we know about, and none of them can do this. Mars's moons eclipse the sun on a regular basis, but they're 2 little dots moving across the face. The moon is just the right size and the sun is just the right distance to be able to produce something like this. And that's because of this. Of course, this is extremely elongated for effect, but total eclipses are going to occur close to perigee, and annular eclipses occur close to apogee. It's a little bit farther away. So here's the thing that I put together to explain this to a bunch of meteorologists, what's going on. Every shadow has 2 parts to it. It has an umbra and it has a penumbra. I don't get excited about penumbral lunar eclipses. They exist. If you look really closely, maybe you can tell that there's an eclipse going on, but your average thin cloud can do a better job of reducing the amount of light. See, I completely forgot about it because it's not worth getting up for. But the penumbra actually plays a big part in solar eclipses, and we'll go through a little bit of that. That umbra is really the biggest deal. So this is what's happening when the Earth is moving through that shadow being cast by the moon. It's going to create the eclipse. And I threw this chart up here, this table. I'm going to refer back to it. It's from a website that I dearly love. It was put together by a gentleman called Xavier Javier. He is a gentleman from France who is a member of the IAU's Eclipse Working Committee. He's put together some fantastic tools that build on work that was first started by Fred Esperneck, who you might know as Mr. Eclipse. He worked at the Goddard Space Flight Center for many, many years and managed all of their information about the eclipses. And Javier's kind of taken on after him. But these are the circumstances you see down there in that first column. C1 is when that partial eclipse starts. C2 is when the total eclipse starts, if you happen to be in the path of totality. Everybody gets a maximum, some point where the most of the sun is going to be covered up, then C3, C4 are the remainder of those. So let's kind of do these little animations here that show the moon, or it's actually, sorry, the Earth moving through the moon's shadow. So that's a total eclipse, and it's moving through that umbra, and you get that. With an annular eclipse, you're moving through that shadow, but what you're moving through is that anti-umbra, that umbra that is cast beyond that focus point, and the Earth is actually moving directly through that focus point during totality. That's why that path is so small. And what the contact points that you see in all of these charts are referring to is these points that the Earth is inside of these little triangles. And you end up with something like this. So there's my favorite web tool. I created a tiny URL for it earlier, so it's easy to get to. But if you go to tiny URL 2024 TSE, you're going to get to this right here. The way the tool works is you click anywhere on there, it sends a little request off to one of his servers that has a JavaScript script running on the back end that has all the necessary data to be able to spit back these circumstances. I'll point one thing out. You see our little yellow friend here that's normally used to show you Google Street View, but down in the low, just to the left below our little yellow friend is a little blue clock. If you click on that blue clock, it will send another request out there and figure out what your time zone is and convert that from UTC to your local time zone. So that's kind of handy. And there's all sorts of great information here. You can see the maximum obscuration at that point. Of course, see the start and the end of the eclipses and the maximum, the altitude and the azimuth of where the sun is at that particular point in time. And then there's some other information in there that's not worth going into. But one really kind of cool thing, it doesn't show here. It would show if I happen to click that inside the path of totality. It will tell you what the shadow's speed is at that point. So for this particular one, and they're all different, that's what I'm about to go into, is the variety of these eclipses. This particular one's on the order of about 1,600 miles an hour. The moon's shadow is moving on the Earth's surface. And that's the thing that's kind of cool to wrap your head around, is this is a shadow moving across the Earth's surface. And once you understand that, understand the shape of the shadow, some of these other things about where you want to be inside the path of the eclipse make a little more sense. So let's jump into that. Why don't we have an eclipse every month? Anybody have an idea? Five degrees. More often than not, that shadow is missing us. It's above or below, and that shadow's got to strike the Earth. And that place where that shadow strikes the Earth and moves along the Earth, that's the path of totality. But yeah, it's tilted about 5 degrees. And during those eclipse seasons, I think that's my next slide. It is not, but this one's cool too. So what you're seeing there in the lower left and the lower right, those little animated GIFs. Come on, Keynote. There we go. Show that movement. And this is about the best way I've seen to demonstrate this, short of, we really need a science on the sphere in here. You have a giant sphere in the middle with projectors, and we could walk around it. You'd really get a feeling for this in 3 dimensions. This isn't 3 dimensions, but you can get a feeling for what's going on with those shadows, the movements of the shadows. Note that little black dot. This is supposed to, there we go. The little black dot in each one of those. Left-hand side is the 2023 annular. Right-hand side is the 2024 total that's coming up. That's totality. That's the path of totality. If you're inside the kind of greenish, bluish looking larger circle, you're going to see a partial eclipse. And what those roughly equate to is whether you're in the umbra or whether you're in the penumbra. Come on. There we go. Okay, so this got me going down the rabbit hole of how rare are these things? And working with my broadcast meteorology friends, and especially their counterparts that went to J school, they ask the same questions every time when something comes up like this, whether it's a meteor shower, a conjunction of a planet and the moon, and especially something like an eclipse. They want to know how rare it is. They want to know the last time it happened. They want to know the next time it happened. It's going to happen. And they also want to know what's the best way to experience it. I really appreciate that last one. So to answer those questions a little more deeply, I dug into Fred's data, went through about 5 millennia of eclipses, wrote a whole bunch of Python scripts to dig through it, and came up with this. So this is just for North Carolina. I went looking for a book that has this kind of information on a per state basis. Doesn't exist. There's lots of eclipse books out there, but they all are either on covering all of the US or all of North America. So I'm in the process of writing this book. I was hoping to have it done and out and up on Amazon by now, and that didn't happen. But here's some of the numbers. Somewhere on Earth, there is a solar eclipse about every 5 to 6 months. That seems a lot more frequent than we would expect, because when we think back about eclipses, we haven't had a good one since 2017. We got this one coming up, and you'll see in a few moments, we're not going to have another one that we could drive to in the US even for another 20 plus years. Yet they happen every 5 to 6 months. So what's the deal? Well, Earth's big, number one, but about 75% of the surface is covered by water. So most of these eclipses are seen by fish, not us. So this is the image from 2013 that had my meteorology friends oohing and ahhing. There's the moon, taking the chunk out of the sun. And there's a couple of things going on here. This is actually less a story of astronomy and more a story of our atmosphere. Because this is down at the horizon at sunrise, looking out over the Atlantic Ocean. Notice how the moon is very not round. It's being distorted by moving through all those layers of atmosphere. And oh yeah, there's something going on right at the surface of the sea that we'll talk about in a second. So it's really squished. I mean, even the sun's a little bit squished. You see that drippy thing going on there? Anybody have an idea about what's happening there? It's a mirage. It's caused by temperature inversion. So the temperature at sea level is very, very different than the temperature right above it, and it will actually cause those light waves to flip. It's one of the theories on why who was ever responsible for watching for icebergs the night the Titanic went down. It's one of the theories about why they did not see that. It was a super clear night. If I remember right, the moon was out, so you should have been able to see things, but they didn't see it. And it might have been a temperature inversion that was forcing that, instead of that image actually physically below the horizon being flipped up here so we can see it. And notice that the image is inverted. That would have done the opposite and flipped it below the horizon. Yes. I can repeat the question so you don't have to run. Or we can do that.
So I've experienced watching the sun set before, and it would have this green flash right at the bottom.
Mhm.
And I noticed that there's a bit of a green tint. What's
That's my garbage camera.
But
yeah.
I mean, what's the science behind that? And is that what I'm seeing here too?
It is not. That's just an aberration with my older camera. Yeah. And I think I'm going to punt on that question because that's too important of one to get wrong. Does anybody have a green flash explanation? Yeah, we'll look it up at the end. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. Yeah. So there's the eclipse seasons. Every quarter, we have a possibility of either a lunar or a solar eclipse. And it's because, again, what you pointed out, that 5-degree tilt of the moon's orbit around Earth, it's got to pass that orbital plane that the Earth is going through. It's called an ascending node or a descending node. When it's passing through Earth's orbital plane, that's when there's a possibility of it either the moon getting in the way of the sun or vice versa. But this doesn't happen every 4 months or 3 months rather. So I went through and I looked at all of the partial eclipses that have passed through North Carolina and I just picked 1500 BC up to 3000. So I didn't cook my laptop too badly. Basically was looking for patterns, was looking to see patterns either in the year that's going along the x-axis or the percent of obscuration, which is what it's really measuring there, is how close North Carolina is to the path. The answer is there's no pattern. It's completely random. So let's look if there's a pattern with occurrences per year. How often does an eclipse occur? How often does 2 eclipses occur in a year? And it does happen. You can see there on the left and the right-hand side. It's kind of hard on this screen. A lot less frequently with total eclipses. The 2 total eclipses will occur in the same year. And the way it happens is one happens in January, the beginning of the year, another one happens in December. It's the only way it's going to happen. But there's no real pattern here either. So what explains this randomness? Let's look at where it ends up in months. I don't know, maybe there's a few patterns here. You tend to have more annular eclipses towards the end of the year. And it tends to slow down a little bit in June. But actually this isn't, it's kind of a false pattern. It's not really a pattern. The answer is lunation, the amount of time that it takes for the moon to go around the Earth, does not align really well with our calendar. Our calendar doesn't align really well with the tropical year, the amount of time it takes the Earth to go around the sun. They're off by almost a quarter day, but not quite a quarter day. And that's why the leap year rules are so terribly complex. Yes.
Isn't Earth at perigee with the sun around January and the apogee in July?
That's driving a lot of the annularity there, yeah, because it's at that point where it's farther away, so it's going to be more likely to promote to an annular over a total. You're absolutely right. So that got me looking at some variability with the eclipses themselves. When we think back to eclipses that we're familiar with, they were all the paths are ballpark 100 miles wide. So I found these 2 really weird ones. This one in 1984 that actually passed through North Carolina. And here's another one that covered completely Virginia, North Carolina, and just about South Carolina. And the size of those paths is completely dependent on the position of the moon, how far away it is. And to your point, it's also a function of how close the Earth is to the sun. So these were pretty amazing. I gave a bit of this talk during astronomy days, and I was really fascinated to be able to talk to a wide variety of people and see what they remembered about eclipses. There was one person that remembered this one in 1984. Any thoughts about why this is the forgotten eclipse? This was really cool. It was quick. It's 5 miles wide. Think about what life was like in 1984 versus now. If you wanted to go get in that eclipse path now, what would you use? Pick this up and you could get right where you needed to be. GPS existed in 1984, but it's hard to find. It was expensive. And actually, I don't know that even if you had one of the ones that hikers use, that was even good enough to put you in that 5 mile path, because back then the military purposely put error into the GPS signals that only military equipment could remove. And it was to prevent them from being used for weapons targeting. So I don't even, if you had one, I don't even think you could get it done. But somebody who grew up near Charlotte remembered this. It went right past there. Well, an annular eclipse doesn't really produce much darkness. And that's something I try to get across to folks that are inside 95 to 99%. It's not going to get dark. And that's really a good takeaway on just how powerful our sun is. You got to be in complete totality before it gets dark. I mean, even at that point where, it's going to Bailey's beads and it's going to the diamond ring, it's still pretty freaking bright out there. So here's some more nerdiness, me throwing it at, in this case, Matplotlib. I was trying to see, what kind of correlation there was between the seconds of totality versus the width of the path, and both with annular and solar. You see this pretty strong correlation there. There's a reason for that. So let's think about a piece of paper. I hand everybody a piece of paper and some scissors. And I tell you, I want you to cut a thin strip of that paper. I want you to cut it in a way that is absolutely as long as possible. Where are you cutting it? Where are you putting your scissors? Right in the middle. You put it on the edge, you'll create a strip of paper, but it'll be really, really thin. It'll be short. So if you put it right in the middle, that's going to maximize the length of that paper. Well, the measurement of the length of that paper is the measurement of the length of totality. So for that reason, if you're going to go wherever you're going to go, we should probably talk about Texas versus Maine, because I got a lot of information from my weather friends on what they think is going to be the place to be. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to Dallas. If you are closer to the center line, you're going to be, that circle that is the moon shadow is going to be moving over you. And then that path that's going to be tracing over you is going to be at its longest. So if you're looking for +4 minutes of totality, you get close to the center line. That's the reason you have to do that. I got a call from I'm not sure what their title was, but they worked with some Parks and Rec with a little suburb of Dallas that was on the extreme northern western edge of the path. And they told me this park that they were planning on holding this event. And I bring up Javier's website as I do, and I click on it, like, you got 10 seconds of totality. Wait, what? I thought, this was 4 minutes. Not where you are. Luckily, they had another park in town. It's amazing how much more of an experience you can get just going a couple of miles closer to the center line. So they switched to another park that was 2 miles down the road, and they got a little over a minute. Not great, but I would personally wouldn't want to be somebody responsible for an event where you had 10 seconds of totality. Because number one, there's going to be disappointment. Number two, you're going to run into problems with people pulling their glasses off too early. It could be a safety problem. Yes.
I've got an interesting question. Say you had a super new moon with the moon about 224,000 miles away,
Okay.
where you get a big, wide totality path.
Mhm.
That much closer moon with the further away sun, is that going to result in a much dimmer corona?
It is, because a good amount of the corona is going to be blocked. That would be a less. So there's something called magnitude, and that's the ratio of the size of the moon to and we're talking angular measurements here. So picture it being 2D on the surface of the dome of the sky. When that ratio is closer to 1, those are the really beautiful total solar eclipses, because you're going to see the most of the corona. But what you're describing right there, where the ratio is going to be such that the moon's diameter is going to be bigger than the sun's diameter, you're going to see less of the corona. Those are also less scientifically interesting.
What was 2017? Right?
Couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Here's a couple other interesting ones. I haven't met somebody yet that could tell me about 1951. It intrigues me because it started in North Carolina. And of course, I'm fascinated with this one in 84. And a couple people might remember the one back in 1970 that went up the coast and out across the Virginia, their version of the Outer Banks. So, okay. So this is looking back at 2017. And this I put up there to kind of drive home the idea that the closer you are to the path, the greater obscuration you're going to see. But when you're starting to get north of 95 degrees, just get in the car. I know not everybody can do it, but if you're waiting for one to come to you, you're going to wait a long time. And that's what this slide tells you. So if you just can't be bothered to go see this one, and you know that you're not going to want to drive to the next one, I've got a map of that too. This is when it's going to come to us. I gave this talk to a middle school in Durham, and some girl gets really excited and tells me it's going to be her, I don't even remember what, 60th birthday or something like that. Like, yeah, make me feel that much older, the 2078 one. That one's going to be pretty cool. It's pretty wide, and it's covering most of the state. And then you got the one in 2099. But those are the ones that we got to wait for them to come to us. Baseball fans, who's a baseball fan? Couple of you, that's not enough. I asked that question last night with my meteorology friends. Half the room raised their hand. I read about this in like ESPN had a story on it, and just the idea fascinated me. Hadn't even thought about it until I read this. Eclipses that occur during the spring and summer, that's baseball season, and paths can go over ballparks. So what do you do if you've got an eclipse going on during your game? Well, if you're a minor league baseball team and they're the kings of promotion, you turn it into a thing. So I got on the phone and I contacted these ball clubs. A couple of them actually called me back. The really neat one was that one up in Salem. It's near Salem, Oregon. You look at the website and it looks like it was designed in 1995, because it probably was. And you look at the front office, the names on the roster there, everybody has the same name because it's a family operation. But I got a hold of one of them and he told me the story about what they did. So they changed the starting time for their game so that totality would occur in the middle of the game. And it's a small team, so they were able to pull this off. They invited a NASA heliophysicist to come in and throw out the first pitch and give a talk before the game, and they made it into a whole big thing. This is for 2017. Yeah, it says 2018, but that's wrong. It's 2017. Believe it was a Nashville Sound that they were going to try and be a little more dramatic. They timed their ball game so that it would end with like 10, 15 minutes until totality occurred. So the partial eclipse was going on throughout most of the game. It's probably started 4th or 5th inning. And then they were going to have everybody get into their seats. They were going to come over the loudspeaker and tell everybody when it's safe to take their eclipse glasses off. Everybody oohs and ahs, put the eclipse glasses back on, and that's a memorable experience. There's one problem. This isn't basketball. There isn't a clock running. It's baseball. It ends when it ends. So this particular GM said, because I asked him the question, what would you do differently if you were in the path of 2024? He said it would have been totally different because of the new rules that are in place with a pitch clock that really has a whole lot more control about when the game's going to end. Long story short, they had about 5 minutes afterwards. Well, one thing that he was telling me about that I hadn't even thought about, you as a general manager are responsible for all those players on the field and the safety and all the people that are in the stands. So you need to have them sitting down when the lights go out, because when the sun goes down in the evening, it takes 45 minutes for it to happen. When the lights go out during a total eclipse, it's like that. And your eyes don't react really quickly. When we're watching it, when we're in the path of totality, we've got our eclipse glasses on, you take them off, you're pretty much used to the darkness at that point. It seems a little bit brighter because it is. The corona is still pretty bright there. But if somebody's wandering around to go get a beer or get a hot dog, it's a safety issue. So they had to think about those things. The Columbus Fireflies, they renamed their team, and they also renamed the visiting team. One was the sun, one was the moon. They had these really cool jerseys printed up just for it. Auctioned them off to raise money for charity there. One of each one of the jerseys went to Cooperstown, to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And they timed it also so that the game was interrupted by totality. So the last pitch before totality and then the first pitch after totality, both those game balls were signed by the batter and the pitcher, and those are up in Cooperstown too. I haven't been up there, I haven't seen it, but from what I understand, they have a display just for Eclipse games. So we learned a lot from minor league baseball. We can do it again. And as it turns out, this is the first time definitely that 2 major league ball clubs have been in the path. So I got on the phone again and I talked to the Cleveland Guardians. Both teams, both them and the Rangers, are opening their season on April 8th. And both of them took very different approaches. I never did get any word back from Texas. They wouldn't return my calls. I have tickets to that game. So And the reason I have tickets to that game is because it is about 6 hours after the partial eclipse ends. They decided to stick with their 7 p.m. start time like usual. If you look back a couple of months ago, Major League Baseball publishes their entire schedule for the entire year all at once. There was one game on the calendar that did not have a start time. It was Cleveland's on the 8th because they were trying to figure out what they were going to do. Talking with the promotions folks up there, they bought 45,000 pairs of Eclipse glasses. They're working with the city, and that's the whole reason they were waiting to set that game time because they weren't sure where they wanted people to be during totality. There's a park next door. They're going to have a whole big thing. NASA's got some events going on at the Science Center there. So they just had to work out their safety plan. That would be pretty cool to see it up there. It'll just be a regular game for Texas, so they kind of punked out there. And I never did get in touch with some of these other ball clubs. They wouldn't return my calls. But looking at their schedules, they don't have games going on that day and didn't think to reschedule them. Yep.
If you're planning to take pictures or travel, you should already have your solar filters, cameras, or whatever already in place because they might be sold out. Also have some book maps, regular paper maps. So otherwise, if everybody's using their cell phone stopped in traffic, you won't get nothing but a white screen on.
Good point. I've actually got another idea for that. Apple Maps, I know for a fact, and I believe there's some maps that will do, some systems that will do this if you use Android. You can download maps. Definitely do that before you leave. You should probably have that for around here anyway, because you never know when you're going to need it, but that's a really good point.
But if the cell phone is locked up, your maps may not work at all.
It will work offline without a cell signal if those maps have been downloaded ahead of time. And you can specify an area that you want to download. And you can download as much as you have memory to.
I got one more shelf.
Yep. If you got your phone with you, I'll show you afterwards.
After.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And the last thing I want to share is what is going to be interesting to this crowd and isn't as interesting to maybe astronomy days folks or whatever. Comets. Comets are so much fun to look for, but they're such a pain to find. Reason being, they're not really visible until they get close to the sun, because it's the sun that's powering surface heating that's causing the gas and all the dust to be spit out to even create the tail that is going to be visible to us. Until it gets close to the sun, that doesn't happen. But because it's close to the sun, you're always playing that balancing game between sunrise or sunset and when that thing's going to be visible. Well, we got an eclipse coming up that is going to turn that sun out for us. And oh yeah, it's going to be just about overhead. So 12 Ponds Brooks is already visible to some pretty decent telescopes far beyond mine. But this may be close to naked eye visible if you know where to look and what you're looking for. But even if you're not able to see that particular comet and you are in the path of totality, something that is definitely worth looking for is the lineup of the planets. The eclipse, and that's what's going down there dead center, is going to be bracketed by Venus and Mercury. A lot of people have never seen Mercury before. It should be visible. And then Mercury and Jupiter are going to bracket Pons Brooks, closer to Mercury. And then way down there, closer to the horizon, is where Saturn and Mars are going to be. But this is kind of a teachable moment, a learnable moment. You can see the lineup, and you can also see the tilt of the Earth's axis at work here. That's what the tilt of this line is matching up with, because they're all within a couple of degrees, roughly on the same plane of orbit around the sun as the Earth is. You got another thing? Go ahead.
For 2017, I found that the brightness of the corona was about the same brightness as a first quarter moon, maybe slightly less. And for those who plan to way on the 2009 eclipse. If you're not living at that time, I wonder if you could look down from heaven and see it 100 million times more spectacular than here on Earth. Thank you.
On all of those discussions of taking pictures, I'm going to give the same recommendation that I give on to anybody that is going down to, say, like the Kennedy Space Center to see a launch. Don't bother taking pictures. I don't, maybe hold your eclipse glasses up to your phone and get a couple of the partial shots, but leave it to the people that are really good at taking those pictures. There's going to be plenty of them out there to have. Don't miss the live experience. Don't look at this through your phone. Don't look at this through your camera. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Listen to the animals. The birds are either going to go dead quiet or they're going to go nuts. And probably both is going to happen at different points in time. Pay attention to the, particularly the temperature. It's going to be at least 5 degrees instant drop in temperature, maybe closer to 10. There will be there'll probably be some good information that comes out afterwards with the mesonets that are out there. You don't realize how many weather stations there are dotted around the United States. They're all going to be measuring this. And there's going to be some pretty cool data that comes out of that. As the shadow passes over, 5-10 degrees is going to drop. Pay attention to what's happening with the clouds. The sudden drop in not just temperature, but the energy that the sun is bringing into the atmosphere will cause clouds to break up. I was in, like I say, Santee. I had friends that were up in Columbia. My sister was down in Charleston. She saw nothing. It was rained out the whole time. Columbia I was a little bit worried about because they had some clouds that were moving through. When it came time for totality, it cleared up. So there's just all this dynamicism around you. And if you're so focused on taking that picture, you're going to miss it. And that's the real experience. Yes, sir.
Hello, testing. That's the same thing that happened in East Tennessee. There was one cumulus cloud coming straight for us, and we were debating we need to hop in the car and drive a couple of miles away. And then about 5 minutes before totality, just poof, it was gone.
It disappears. Yep.
Yeah. And I was just gonna say, you probably don't have this data, but if someone had it, it would be interesting to convince people. I would say the full moon is probably equivalent to about 99.999% coverage, if not more. So people have an idea that,
That seems reasonable. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, to me, it seemed like about 3 or 4 seconds after totality was over.
You can
it
walk
was
out and read a
right.
newspaper with a full moon.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
that's a
people
good-
just have the idea it's
analogy.
gonna get dark, and it's not even close
You
to dark.
really start to respect the sun after you see it go away,
Yeah, exactly.
and just how powerful it is. I did hear some of the local residents of that particular part of South Carolina hooping and hauling and setting off fireworks. It was kind of interesting. I hadn't heard of this before this year. Has anybody ever heard of eclipse sickness? Now, my first reaction to that was, okay, but there's actually some decent science to it. I got contacted by some, not really a medical journal. I think they were kind of a news service for physicians that, for emergency physicians, doctors that work in ERs, to try to prepare them for people coming in. It's a real thing. And what it actually is, it's a form of anxiety. So people's fight or flight reflex can get triggered by an eclipse. So if you've been in one, you know that it's a pretty surreal experience. You can prepare yourself all you want. You can read all the books you want around it. You can watch all the videos of it, but it's different when you're in there. Some people react to that a little more intensely than others, to the point where it will affect them so much, they will show up at an ER. It's real. Other questions? Others?
Some spectacular partial photos with the eclipse sun in scenic clouds through the solar filter. I just upped the exposure just a little bit And when I showed it to one lady down at Clemson, she almost started to cry. The energy coming off of that picture was so intense.
Any of us that have worked with the public in observing sessions probably have a story about, you know, showing somebody Saturn rings for the first time. It can be pretty emotional. So it doesn't surprise me at all that that would be the reaction to an eclipse. That is not my picture. I don't know who took that. That's a fantastic picture. Who else has 2017? That 80, 85 in that range. I think so. You know, just staring at it, that's what it looks like to me.
That picture requires settings on the camera to keep it from overexposing.
Like mine are way overexposed, but they're mine. And I love them for it. Could they be better? Yeah, I could go get somebody else's and recreate that layout that I did, but I saw that. I took that. I got the worst sunburn standing out there the whole time because I just wouldn't go in.
I think that picture had to.
Anybody else have 2017 stories they want to share?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm Dana. I'm Chris. Anyway, yeah. So, I don't know. I'm not trying to make a spectacle of this. How many people have been in this to Path of Totality? Okay, so like
About half.
yeah, pretty much half the.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, well, those who have.
I told you I was preaching to the choir.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that those who never have, all I can say is that when I was in out there in 2017, probably not too far from where Steve Blake was, but it was really weird. It's like, yeah, kind of like when the sun starts to go down, as far as like the feeling of the air, you could feel the humidity start to rise. This is Tennessee, okay?
It gets
So,
still.
yeah, it gets still. And then I just like looked around and I looked at the other people that were there. Steve Christensen, our resident astrophysicist in the club. I asked him, I was like, does it feel like it's gotten colder? Because this was August, Tennessee, and it was like the low 90s, and you could feel it. And it's just like, and then Steve Christensen, because well, he has too much money, he buys everything. He had this app counting down. And I was just sitting there and it was like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I was just like, my God, is it going to get dark or not? And then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And it's like a dimmer switch, is what I say to everybody. It's not like, you know, it's really weird. It's a dimmer switch is what it is. And so, yeah, so there you go. The only way, I guess, from a science fiction point of view, it's as if a giant UFO just flew over in front of the sun and just sat there and then moved on. So
Let's let her go.
How many of totalities have you experienced personally?
personally.
One, Tony.
17.
So are there other people in this room have experienced more than one? Okay. So my curiosity is specifically of what you just mentioned about illness, totality illness, solar eclipse illness. And I'm curious if you've thought about this at all, could you predict around either the coming together of people or the increased fracturing of people due to having a more collective experience?
It's a really good question. And there was a seminar that was put on by the American Astronomical Society. It was a year to the day, I believe, before the October annular eclipse. We're trying to get prepared for that one and for this one. And they brought some social scientists on to talk about that very thing. And the quote that stuck with me was that solar eclipses are happening above you, but they also happen inside of you. And some of the reactions that we've been talking about, and particularly that fight or flight one, I didn't even know about until just recently, make a whole lot of sense. I was at an event in Charlotte where they brought like half of the Charlotte school system to the university there and had, you know, a bunch of different things set up, and I'm there demoing some NASA thing. And a woman came with her daughter, and they had immigrated here from, and forgive me, I forget which country in Africa it was, but she was from Africa, and got to talking about solar eclipses. And she told me about some of the superstitions that run around this. They insist that their pregnant women not go outside because it was a danger to the unborn child. There's a lot of social aspects to this, and to your point, some of them can be very good. Some of them, I am a big proponent of these kind of things, and what you do with public observing sessions where you're showing people these wonderful things, that it can only have positive impacts. It makes us feel small, but in a good way, I think. Just the experience of seeing this sun, moon, earth system, and again, this being the only one where you can see something like this, hopefully isn't lost on people. And fracturing, I don't know, we're so good at that now. I don't even want to think about that. Yeah. It is, and there's some good books out there. Forgive me, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but the descriptions of them should tell you whether it's going to touch into that or if it's just going to be a total nerd book. But the social aspects of it are absolutely fascinating. One other nerd thing before I forget, Journal of American Medicine, I forget which eclipse it was, but they had pictures of a half moon burned onto somebody's retina because they had heard, this was pre-internet, this just sounds like something they'd read about on the internet and do. They had heard that if you stare at the sun long enough, the pain will go away. Yeah, I suppose it will when your eyesight is completely lost, but that was permanent. Back of the retina burned permanently. So I don't have to tell y'all to be safe. You know, definitely wear your glasses. Yeah, I appreciate that.